All right, we should be back. I just adjusted a couple settings here. Come next week, come Monday, you'll notice we will be broadcasting from a different platform. We've not been happy with this broadcast platform. They also changed something yesterday as far as the streaming, and I think it's what's giving a few issues here. But come Monday, we will have the brand new platform. So hopefully, it's coming in just fine on your side. All right. So FCX from a daily standpoint, we're still dealing with an upward trend. We're still dealing with a bullish pattern. We're still dealing with rising volumes on the handle part of a cup and handle pattern. Odds favor it going higher. Okay. But from an intraday basis, we now or from a basis right now, we now have a little bit of a catalyst in the short term to go down, as the stock is kind of sold off with the Cohen comments. If we look in, and let me pull it up on a 1 minute chart here. Okay, you can see the overall sell off. We get this cascading effect down to 36.27, and now a fast sharp bounce. Okay, one of the things about FCX, and if we come back to this daily chart, and I mentioned this the other day when we got in, but FCX rarely closes at its highs, but also it's not a stock that closes at its lows very often either. Okay, FCX, we're also dealing on options expiration. Okay, where we get any sort of catalyst that's going to be a little bit more volatile. And so, with that being in play, with what has happened with the bullish on the daily chart and what's going on this minute chart with the high volume kind of cascading effect here, I want to hold this into the close. Now, am I going to hold this over the weekend? 3-day weekend after today's price action? I definitely have to reassess that. And haven't made a decision on that just yet as far as where I will go with that, but I definitely have to take that into account, with FCX. Now, FCX also has earnings next week. Let me show that to you here. And then I'll go talk about the market. But FCX has earnings early next week, on Wednesday morning. Okay, Wednesday morning. So we kind of have Tuesday to hold it. We will have some time decay, not a whole lot from the 3-day weekend, but we're in the money enough that it's not going to be a major decay factor. Some of the stuff that I've gone through a lot of the reports and different analysts and everything else on Freeport McMoran here. And it's kind of a mixed picture as far as expectations in regards to earnings. I do, from a chart standpoint, it does favor a gap up breakout for FCX, but we're dealing with a chart and a fundamental event. They oftentimes don't match. So, as far as FCX goes, there's nothing really for me to react to right here. As far as one way or the other, I will give it into the close to make a decision on that. Yes, it is a bearish engulfing. One of you sent me an email, said, "Hey, probably good news. FCX has a bearish engulfing. It's probably going up now." And I kind of just chuckled at that. Yeah, a lot of the bearish engulfing out there have actually been buy points. My biggest fear with FCX, and my biggest concern when we got into the trade, and we talked about FCX and Halliburton, and my biggest fear with both of these was, do they have a catalyst to move? When we're dealing with earnings time here, do they have a catalyst to move without earnings? Halliburton's been really flat. FCX, dealing with kind of contracting bands. Are they going to kind of flatten out? So, with FCX, it's what, up 42 cents since we got in, now down 42 cents. But going forward, really, the question comes, is it worth holding it over the weekend? And a lot of that, to me, in that decision, really is going to come down to the volumes. Really, it's going to come down to the volumes on FCX, and if the volumes can kind of sustain into the close. Now, naturally, they will be a little bit higher because it is options expiration, but that's kind of where that decision will come down to. Yeah, JM, John. John's very bullish on FCX long term. I sent him a. He's not here with me today. I did send him a couple notes. I haven't heard back from him just yet. As far as his thoughts on FCX, but FCX is. It opened up a little bit higher today. We had some of that news out of Citigroup where they put a long-term buy on some of these mining stocks. Again, we're just dealing with a catalyst with FCX right now, where Cohen basically had some cautious comments, and all those comments aren't public just yet. Okay. BMY. BMY, Bristol Myers. This whole sector, we've seen, different movements. I mean, Gilead yesterday, strong uptick. Amgen, kind of in a very nice bullish mode. BMY, has kind of had that uptick and been kind of consolidating back. I rarely will play with these stocks simply because it's so news based. It really is very news based, and they can really kind of go anywhere at any time. Pulling this one, ICPT. Let me pull this one up here. If you want to talk about pharma and what they can do. Now, the big pharmas aren't going to do this, but you got ICPT, who was trading, at $70 the other day, then at 500, now at 300. I mean, this looks like a chart for the price of Bitcoin. But these things can be quite volatile. BMY is a larger one, isn't going to move nearly as much. But, as long as BMY stays above 54, the bullishness continues. And really 54 may be a little bit tight. It's one that I'd have trouble shorting here because of the major trend. But this is one that's probably more going to take some sort of catalyst to move it. Yeah, Ken. Vegas Sands moving here today a little bit. It had a nice little pop up, and then it's kind of come off its highs just a little bit. MGM has been very similar. Wynn has been very similar, except Wynn hasn't quite had the pullback. But this group, this is one of those groups. It's just white hot. And any move on it doesn't necessarily have to have a catalyst or something that has gone on that says, hey, this is good for the stock, so it's naturally going to go up. It is options expiration today. Does some of it have to do with that? Sure. But as far as putting a hard reason on it moving, there's not a great one out there. What do I think about it? The trend remains. Am I going to argue with anybody who buys into Las Vegas Sand, Wynn, MGM here? No, not at all. If you're in them, there's no reason to be getting out of them. And if you're not in them and you want in them, there's not really a good reason to stay away. They have worked off a lot of the overbought. They've consolidated. They've had some sell-offs, and there's nothing here that says, well, Vegas Sands can't continue on higher. Now, me personally, I have a little aversion to stocks that break 80 for the first time. I just seen so many times where they break 80, move up into the low 80s, and then come back down to the $80 mark. Who was it recently that here's Home Depot, breaks above 80, kind of pushes back up. It's, to go back around 80. A lot of times they can dance around 80 quite a bit. They don't have to, but I've seen that more times than not, so that keeps me away a little bit. But overall, nothing bearish in that group at all. Yeah, Jake, looks like FCX is sitting on a lot of support. It is, and look, when we look from just a price pattern standpoint on FCX, this volume build, and I know some of you will look at the color of the volume and say, well, that's bearish. No, not necessarily. We have this volume build, more interest coming in on this little handle action. That's very typical of a cup and handle pattern. The other thing that's very typical of a cup and handle pattern is heavy volume into the initial top. So we have this heavy volume here in October pushing FCX up to 37, and then notice the relatively light volume November, December on the correction. Okay, now we have the pickup in volume and interest now that it's kind of in this handle pattern. It's an extremely bullish pattern. Okay, and yeah, it may be set to pop on earnings. The one risk that we take in holding it on earnings is, basically it going to zero. Can we take that risk in the challenge? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, we can take that risk. And I really don't think it would go to zero. I think probably worst case scenario, we're looking at, waking up Tuesday morning with Freeport trading around 35, where we'd be able to capture about, 30 or 40% of the value of the option, with that move. But, inside, would I love to hold it over earnings? Yeah. I would. I have not made that decision just yet, and part of this also comes down to what else is out there, right? And what else is going on. I mean, I've now been able to go through and read the Schlumberger report, right? I've been able to go in, look at GE, look at CSX, and kind of see where some of these stocks are and what the earnings have been. And so, okay, do you kind of go after one of those, or do you want to kind of take a little bit of a chance here? Very interesting. Most stocks today with earnings, we saw more gap downs than gap ups, and a lot of times during earnings periods, you'll kind of get that one day everything decides to gap up, the next day everything decides to gap down. But anyway, I will talk about Hershey a little bit later, or excuse me, more about FCX as the day progresses. Hershey, this is Hershey is. Hershey's trading like Hershey, where it doesn't want to have 2 days in a row where it goes up. Look, you have very bullish patterns going on, all signs pointing that it wants to hit 100, still holding on to the 7-day moving average. Lower volumes here today. Is this just an options expiration phenomena? Yeah, I mean, you guys know I'm not a huge fan of making decisions on trades and on stocks on options expiration, and this is probably the options expiration that I'm less of a fan of making decisions than any other. Why? We're dealing with a January we're dealing with a January expiration. These options haven't just been open for 2 or 3 months. These options have been open in many cases for 2 or 3 years, and so fund managers who bought options on something 2 years ago as protection, or maybe they sold puts in order to be buyers of the stock. There's a lot of adjusting that has to go on this type of a day. So it is one of those days where you don't necessarily trust what you see. And just because something, case in point, here's Exxon. Okay, I mean, if this is a price pattern and a chart pattern that screams that it wants to go to 102 on this move. We've had the little ABC correction back to the lower Bollinger Band. Stowe bouncing off 20, to go to 102, 103 here on ExxonMobil, very logical. Am I going to get into it here today? No, not at all. Just because so many times it just comes back to bite you making a decision based on what you see on options expiration. Yeah, Max. No, and you equate those correctly, right? I mean, you equate those correctly. Holding FCX over earnings, okay, is like the New England Patriots and betting on that. And as a Denver Broncos fan, we won't get into that. But there is that element of risk with Bank of America. Okay, the risk of holding it over earnings. There was a lot more fundamental support. There was a reason to be very optimistic of that over earnings, to where you can look at it and say we got about an 80-90% chance that it's going up. With FCX, we don't have anything, we don't have any earnings that we've had over the last week and a half that are really going to tell us what FCX is going to do. The closest we have is Alcoa. And Alcoa dropped on their earnings, and Alcoa has been grinding higher, but also Alcoa is building capacity. The auto industry is being good for Alcoa. They're increasing their capacity with aluminum, and but that's about the best that we have, and that is really a stretch. I mean, Alcoa is not to FCX what Wells Fargo is to Bank of America. Bank of America and Wells Fargo are much more similar businesses than Alcoa and FCX. So we don't nearly enough or as much here on FCX to kind of go off of and make a decision. Yeah, Ken, you bought some GDX yesterday. Very nice. Very nice. Nice move here today. I know we were talking about SLW this morning, as it kind of hits its 200-day moving average. But the sector remains strong, and gold and silver will likely remain strong as long as this TLT continues to move up. We have interest rates falling here, and TLT is continuing to rise. A lot of people will argue that bonds move before stocks, and so the move up in bonds is foreshadowing a strong move lower in stocks. That hasn't been the correlation over the last several years, but it is a normal correlation. And if the markets are going back to a normalized period, then it's very much, it bodes very well here, for the GDX and for some of those stocks there. Okay. Was asked earlier today if FCX was like trading the GDX, and it's not. FCX, it does have the copper and gold, but FCX has a strong oil component to it now. In fact, if you look back here, you look at this big drop in 2012 here on FCX. This is when they purchased the oil capacity, and they've been able to during 2013 to start integrating that, showing some earnings potential on that, and that kind of bodes well here for FCX. But the earnings will be very interesting because it's not going to be like what their normal earnings have been with gold and copper. There's going to be a lot more of an oil chatter in regards to that. And look, Schlumberger, some of the best comments that they had were on their international divisions. I expected Schlumberger to have a whole bunch of really good things to say about the domestic operations here in the U.S. But what was surprising with Schlumberger is some of the talk that they had on their operations overseas. And FCX's oil operations are overseas. Is there an equating factor? A little tough, little tough to make that stretch. So here with FCX, right? It may go down a little bit more here into the close, but I am going to wait until the close here to make a decision on it. I want to go and look at what the exact theta and risk is holding it. And we'll kind of make that decision probably about 45 minutes before the close here today. Look, broader market, okay, broader market down about 4 points, right? It's not, we talked about this market to make a huge surge up or huge surge down probably isn't going to do it. This is going to be a market where generally you need a catalyst if you're going to move. I mean, you can be in the best chart and the best stock in the world. I mean, one of the prettiest charts to me out there is Colgate, okay? One of the very nice, very pretty chart, but is it ready to move? Being options expiration, being the market where it is, and that's really kind of the crux of the matter here. All right, looks like we got some football chatter here. Good deal. All righty. A couple things worth looking at as we go forward here. U.S. Steel, okay, and we talked about steel back late year, a little bit early this year. Talked about some of the longer term prospects for steel and how some of these companies are going from no profits to turning profitable this year. and that being an overall long-term very good thing for these companies. Citigroup yesterday comes out, talks very bullish on these types of companies, but it's still a little bit early. These are still in correction modes. U.S. Steel, I know, was upgraded the other day, flew higher. Nucor was downgraded and kind of hit bottom and popped up. But this whole group, the AKS, the Nucor, the U.S. Steel, they're still a little bit early. In this steel group, and while I like them, and if you're a long-term investor and you want to start building a position, I think this is a really nice place to build a position. From an options trading standpoint, they're still a little bit early. I have in my notes to buy U.S. Steel at 27.30. If we get down there, but obviously the price action will dictate overall there. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for hopping on. Again, as with FCX Bank of America, we will not exit this position today, no matter what. We will continue to hold that. With FCX, again, we're going to kind of have to play this into the close a little bit. Even if it rallies 20 cents, 25 cents into the close, I may still take it off, given the 3-day weekend and earnings Tuesday. But we'll make that decision into the close. Thanks for hopping on, and we'll talk to you later. Take care.